Finally, among the remaining race groups, American Indians and Alaska Natives, a much smaller group, they're projected to rise to only about 2% by the mid-century. In Illinois and Chicago, where many of our students come from, the rates are about the same. Today, Latinos in Illinois make up about 2 million residents, or about 15% of the state's population. So we really mimic what the nation is also showing. More than 33% of school-aged children in the city of Chicago are Latino already. So about a third of the kids in our schools today are Latino in the Chicago and Greaterland area. Interestingly, though, the Latino population is growing fast in both the Chicago suburbs as well, where Latinos already outnumber their counterparts in the city. Again, we often think of the Latino population as an urban population, but for those of us who work in suburban areas of Chicago, we know that there are many, many Latinos, and now that population is larger. So when we think of places like Elgin, Berwyn, Cicero, the list goes on, Aurora, et cetera, right? Palos Hills, LaGrange, et cetera, the growth of the Latino population there is huge. But we have to remember also that this population, although growing fast, also faces some challenges. And some of the challenges that it faces is that, first of all, about 58% are native born. So almost 60% of the Latino population nationally are US citizens, something I think that's often misunderstood if you read just the media. If you read the media today, the impression is that everyone's a foreigner and undocumented. Not the case. Also, the median age for this group is much younger than its comparison to whites and blacks. The median age for Latinos is 26, for whites the age is 40, and for blacks is 32. So it's a much younger population. And again, for those of us in education, this matters. These are the people that we are teaching, and this population is growing. Furthermore, the poverty rates are high. The poverty rates are 23% for Latino children, people 17 years and younger. And these are poverty rates by the US government. So you are poor, but you are very poor. Because if you know those poverty rates, they are quite low. So about 1 in 4 Latino children are born in poverty. Again, this is something that we need to consider when thinking about education. And the annual personal earnings for Hispanics for an individual is about $23,423. In comparison to whites, that's $33,811, and blacks for $25,460. These numbers are 208 numbers, I believe, by the census. And again, what it shows you is that this population is very poor, and the challenges that we have are going to be very tricky. So, in other words, the Latino population in Illinois is growing very quickly. It's a very young population, and it's generally a poor population, or at least poorer than the other racial groups. In terms of education, what's important to understand here is that only 1 in 10 Latino adults have a college education in 2000. And this number hasn't changed very much. So out of 100 Latino students, only 10 of them will ever have received a bachelor's degree. In comparison, graduation rates have increased substantially for African Americans from 11% to 18% from 1975 to 2000, and for non-Latino whites from 23% to 34% during the same time period. Among Latinos, educational attainment patterns vary by national origin. So again, the idea that not all Latinos are the same. Although when we think of Latinos, the default group is Mexican Americans. We have to remember also that we have our Puerto Ricans brothers and sisters, our Cuban brothers and sisters, Central Americans, South Americans, and they're a very diverse group. Their relationship with the United States historically has been very different. For example, U.S. or Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens. It's not the case for any other Latino group. Cubans have had a very different relationship with the United States because of the relationship we've had with Cuba. Et cetera, et cetera. And as educators, it's important for us to understand that. So not all Latino groups are the same, and in general, Mexican-American origin students attain less education than both their Puerto Rican or Cuban counterparts. In addition, immigrant generation matters, meaning are you first generation, second generation, third generation? How long have you been in this country? Where high school completion rates improve with each immigrant group, the generational pattern for college completion among adults is not linear. About 1 in 10 foreign-born Latino adults has a college degree, or what we think about as first generation, and this increases to 18% for the second generation. But what's very interesting as a social scientist is when we go to the third generation of Latinos here in the United States, meaning their grandparents were the individuals who came to the US, this figure falls to 11%. So that social mobility that we have seen for white immigrant groups in the past, right, an increase in social mobility, increase in educational attainment, increase in income, does not hold necessarily for Latino immigrants. Oddly, sometimes, the longer we've been here, the worse we do. And one of the questions that we have to ask as researchers is, why is that? What is not working here? For the third generation, we're talking about Latinos who are English dominant or English only speaking, whose parents are US born, they're American, and yet their educational attainment drops. Questions that we need to ask: what are we not doing? How can we help this population attain and keep moving forward, especially because this population is growing so rapidly? Again, Latino high school graduates are less likely to go to college than their non-Latino white or African American graduates. For many of us who work with Latino students, we face this all the time, trying to help our students who are in high school go on to college. So if we've passed the obstacles and they're graduating from high school, and many of us know that the high school dropout rates in the Chicagoland area can be extraordinarily high. A few years ago, I spoke at an 8th grade graduation in the Pilsen Little Village, where the teacher told me that a third of the 8th graders were not going to be graduating, that they would have to take summer classes. And there we're talking about 8th grade. In high school, this replicates itself. So we're talking about high school completion, but of those Latino students who do complete high school, we still have to now move them into college. In comparison, only 1/3 of high school graduates go on to college. For African Americans, this is a little higher at 46%. Again, there's a lot of work to be done, not only with the Latino community, but with African Americans, with white students, with Native Americans, and with even some Asian groups that are not doing very well, and many Asian groups are still dealing with poverty issues as well. For Latinos who do attend college, as Professor Mayman addressed, they are more likely to attend a 2-year or community colleges than they are 4-year. Again, it's terrific that they're going on to a community college. That's wonderful. But now our job is to move them to a 4-year institution because, as was said earlier, what matters is the BA. And frankly, I tell my students, and then the master's degree, right? You have to keep pushing forward. And many of our students get stuck at the community college level, often because they're working too much, family obligations, financial stress. And again, this is something that for the Latino community is very, very important.